The criminal charges against James Comey are historic, but President Trump is suggesting the former FBI director may not be his only political adversary facing an indictment in the near future. Speaking today, the president implied that some of his other political foes could soon be targeted. Here's how he responded to a question about a possible list of other opponents who could be in the DOJ's crosshairs.
It's not a list, but I think there'll be others. I mean, they're corrupt. These were corrupt, radical left Democrats. But Comey essentially was he's worse than a Democrat. I would say the Democrats are better than Comey. But no, there'll be others. Look, that's my opinion. He lied. That was a very important question that he was asked. And he wanted to be specific, but he didn't. The only thing that happened to him, he didn't think he'd get caught.
CNN's Caitlin Polantz is here with us on this story. All right, Caitlin, walk us through these indictments. It's not a very long indictment, and tell us where this goes.
2 pages, that's it. This is not what you would call a speaking indictment. Sometimes prosecutors write out everything or a lot of what they have, and you can get a very good sense of the case. What we have of this case so far, it's the 2 charges. One, obstruction of the congressional proceeding that is based around this testimony that Jim Comey gave back in 2020, September of 2020. There's also a false statements charge. So that zeroes in, it goes hand in hand with the obstruction charge. It zeroes in on a specific answer he gave in that 2020 testimony. He was asked by Senator Ted Cruz at the time if he had authorized someone to leak to the media, and Comey essentially said no. And he said he stood by previous testimony where he had also said no, he hadn't authorized someone to leak to the media. There isn't much more here. There's person 1, person 2, or person 3 named in these documents, but a lot of this is going to have to come out in court. The defense team will ask for more information. They will get evidence in the case, and then there will be a trial where much more about this alleged leak and what the Justice Department knows happened here will have to come out in the courtroom. That's a primary thing I'm looking for, right? What details are we going to get about what happened? What has the Justice Department found to be able to present this case to the grand jury, get this indictment? I'm also going to be looking for how much politics will come into this courtroom. Right now, the first appearance for Jim Comey is on October 9th. It's going to be in the federal courthouse in Alexandria, Virginia, a courthouse where Donald Trump's 2016 campaign chair, Paul Manafort, was tried and convicted several years ago. So this is a courthouse that is no stranger to a high-profile political case around Trump. But we also, in that first appearance, we probably will hear Comey say he's not guilty, enter the pleading, and we'll get a sense of a timeline, how fast it'll move.
The alleged leak has to do with an investigation into person 1?
An unspecified investigation into person 1, and we're working right now to nail down exactly who that is. It could be based on the question that Ted Cruz asks in the Senate hearing. It could be either about the Clinton investigation in 2016 or the Trump investigation in 2016. So will this be a Russiagate redux, or will this be about Hillary Clinton and her emails again?
That would be ironic if he was standing up for Hillary Clinton and her emails. Caitlin Polantz, thank you so much for that. Jessica?
All right, let's talk more about the ins and outs of this case with Ankush Khardori. He's a former federal prosecutor, senior writer now for Politico magazine. Thanks so much for being here with us. Let's just start first with this idea that he was indicted by a federal grand jury. There were on 2 of the 3 counts that they were trying to get indictments on. They were not able to get an indictment on one of those. What does that tell you?
Well, it says that that particular count was quite weak, even too weak, even for it to pass muster with this grand jury. The standard that grand jurors have to apply is a probable cause standard, meaning has the government presented sufficient evidence for the grand jurors to conclude that there's probable cause that the defendant committed the crime that they are accused of. It's much lower than beyond a reasonable doubt. The fact that one of the 3 counts was cut, highly unusual. But I have to say, I was a little surprised even that the grand jury returned this indictment at all, given the highly, highly irregular and highly public nature of Trump's interventions and his public pleading for Comey to be charged by his attorney general.
And help people level set that when it comes to getting, and you kind of brushed up against this, but getting an indictment returned, how hard is that? There's that saying you could indict a ham sandwich, but how hard is that? And you note that the burden is lower than what you traditionally see in a courtroom when it is beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yeah, look, the standard is much lower than beyond a reasonable doubt. One of the reasons why people say you can get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich is based on actually a little bit of a misunderstanding about how at least federal prosecutors work. One of the reasons why, a major reason, in fact, why grand jurors tend to sign off on proposed charges brought by federal prosecutors is that federal prosecutors tend to be very selective.
One thing important about the second Trump administration, it shows us that after years of being told no, Donald Trump has finally found the people who are willing to go after Jim Comey in a way he has wanted to do for years. What his hand-picked Attorney General in his first term, Bill Barr, refused to do, and what the special counsel Barr appointed, John Durham, also found no evidence for and refused to do. Bill Barr actually wrote about Trump's hectoring him to indict Jim Comey in his book. And he wrote that he told Trump that if the Justice Department tried to prosecute Comey for handing memos about his conversations with Trump to his lawyers, it would, quote, be obviously vindictive and, quote, meet with quick defeat, end quote. Now, in his second term, Trump can say, quote, nothing is being done. What about Comey, Adam Shifty Schiff, and Letitia? He can force out a U.S. attorney with sterling Republican credentials and relationships in MAGA Republican circles, including atop Trump's DOJ, who refused to bring the case against Comey until he finds that weak link, one who says yes, and get an indictment of a critic he's been obsessed with for years in the matter of days. The indictment of Jim Comey, a flashing red warning sign for the health of democracy and the rule of law in the United States, is where we begin today with some of our most trusted friends and reporters. Ken Delanian is here. He is the justice and intelligence correspondent for MSNBC. He's been tracking the story for us all week long and all day, and he has some major new developments on the workings of Trump's Department of Justice. Also with us, former Department of Justice pardon attorney Liz Oyer. She was fired by Trump's Justice Department in March after she refused to restore Mel Gibson's gun rights. And former federal prosecutor Brendan Ballou is also with us. Ken Delanian, I understand you've got news. We start with you.
That's right, Nicole. I think you sketched out the big picture well and the large stakes here, but there's also the small picture, which is what the heck is this indictment actually about? Because there's so little detail in it. And we had assumed all day long that this indictment had to do with James Comey's relationship with his deputy, Andrew McCabe, and whether he authorized Andrew McCabe to leak a particular story to the Wall Street Journal. But it turns out that's not accurate. I've just confirmed from a source familiar that the main allegation of lying to Congress in this indictment has to do with the allegation that James Comey lied about whether he told his friend Dan Richman, who was at the time a special government employee at the FBI, whether he authorized him to be an anonymous source for reporters about stories about an FBI investigation into Hillary Clinton. So Richmond would be person number 3 in the indictment, we are told, and Hillary Clinton would be person number 1. That sort of goes against what we thought this indictment was about, and it raises this question, because we don't know what the evidence is that the government has supporting their allegation that James Comey lied to Congress. Comey testified in 2017 that he never authorized anyone at the FBI to be an anonymous source for reporters. And then when he was asked about that again in this 2020 hearing, which is within the statute of limitations, he said, I stand by my 2017 testimony. So it appears that the government is saying that 2017 testimony was a lie. You repeated the lie in 2020. And the way they would prove that is if they had evidence that, in fact, Comey did authorize Dan Richman to talk to reporters about an investigation into Hillary Clinton back then. That's a very specific thing, and so it suggests to me that they think they have something. And it changes the way I am thinking about this indictment. It doesn't change, however, the big picture that you described, which is that this is a case that career prosecutors inside that office and the U.S. attorney in that office did not think was worthy of bringing forth as a criminal case. And in fact, Eric Siebert, the U.S. attorney, was essentially forced out because he resisted bringing this case and also the one against Tish James. And we have new news on that score. He had a deputy, a woman named Maya Song, a very well-regarded person within that office. She was demoted when he was fired to prevent her from becoming the interim U.S. attorney, because she wouldn't bring the case either. Today, we have learned, my colleague Carol Leonnig, reporting on her day off, has learned that Maya Song was fired today from the Justice Department. So that bit of news, adding to this picture that the White House has essentially seized control of this Justice Department, and any figment of independence that the Justice Department may have had from the White House has evaporated in the Trump administration.
Kundalini, in the New York Times reported last Friday night that Mr. Richmond had been interviewed, I think about a week and a half or 2 weeks ago, ostensibly by Eric Siebert or his deputies. Do we know if he was interviewed again in the period after Siebert was forced out? Because I think there were accounts saying that he hadn't proved helpful in moving toward an indictment of Jim Comey.
Yeah, I mean, I would be careful about, the grand juries are secret, and I don't know for sure, but I have no reason to believe that Dan Richmond was interviewed again, and he did not testify before the grand jury. He was only interviewed, which suggests, that usually suggests that they believe the witness wasn't, in fact, helpful. But there are also a lot of documents, don't forget, that Kash Patel is rummaging through in different rooms inside the FBI, because they are obsessed, remember, with this Trump-Russia investigation.
Everyone is uniting here. I've talked about this. You've seen former judges, prosecutors. Remember, a lot of judges, not every judge, but a good chunk of judges spend some time as prosecution during their career, right, at some level. And former DOJ people, obviously, they worked at the DOJ. Their job was to get the bad guys. These are not like purely defense people. Ideologically, just based on, stereotype, they should default in a lot of ways towards a bias in favor of the prosecution. And yet here, the Trump-aligned prosecution is so woefully inexperienced, and that's me being polite, calling them inexperienced, and potentially just in the tank for Trump, that no one buys this case. It's the projection. Remember how, like, a few days ago, Megyn Kelly came out and said when Tom Homan was, the investigation about Tom Homan broke, and Megyn Kelly was like, we don't care. We don't care because no one trusts you. No one trusts the Democratic aligned DOJ or whatnot. We just automatically think all of our people are innocent. But, like, if anyone has the right to be conspiratorial, it's people not in the MAGA camp. Because this is the biggest witch hunt I've ever seen. Right? It's the biggest witch hunt I've ever seen, at least regarding a high-profile candidate and whatnot, or a high-profile, accused. No one's buying it. Nobody. And again, a lot of people have a lot of reasons to not like Comey, his conduct during 2016. And yet, everyone is speaking out. The echoes between this and Kimmel are actually really important. A lot of people didn't love Kimmel for whatever reason, but they stood up for him. And a lot of people don't like Comey for whatever reason, and they're standing up for them. Because I gotta be honest, that as imperfect as the anti-MAGA wing can be sometimes, because, a lot of them are corporate right-wingers, and they actually don't care about the working class and all of that. There does seem to be at least a semi-principled stand for the First Amendment and for equality under the law, something MAGA gives no damn about.